You know, the story of Kings of Leon is one of the wildest contradictions in all of modern rock. I mean, how on earth did four preachers' kids from the Deep South, raised on nothing but gospel music, somehow become global stadium superstars? Well, it's an incredible story of faith, family, fame, and a truly spectacular flameout. So picture this. It's 2010. Kings of Leon are absolutely everywhere. Their album, Only by the Night, has just exploded, transforming them from a kind of cult favorite into a household name. They're collecting Grammys for You Somebody, selling out massive arenas all over the globe. They are, without a doubt, one of the biggest bands on the entire planet. This was the absolute peak.
But just a year later, this hits the internet. Bassist Jared Followell sends out this really cryptic, desperate tweet right after his brother, lead singer Caleb, just walked off stage in the middle of a show. And just like that, the biggest band in the world looked like it was completely falling apart right in front of our eyes.
So what happened? How did they get there? Well, to really understand their collapse, you first have to understand their almost impossible rise. So let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Okay, first, let's look at the two moments that really blew the lid off the band's crisis. I mean, these weren't just rumors flying around. These were infamous, very public meltdowns that have pretty much become the stuff of rock and roll legend.
The first one, you can't even make this up, was just bizarre. They're playing a show in St. Louis, and there's a pigeon problem in the rafters, and the band gets, well, bombarded by pigeon droppings. They had to walk off after just 3 songs. It felt like a weird omen. But what happened in Dallas a year later, that was way more serious. Caleb, who was struggling with his voice and was clearly intoxicated, tells the crowd he's going to go vomit, drink a beer, and come right back. He never did. The rest of their U.S. tour was canceled on the spot.
So now, let's dig into their origin story, because their upbringing is honestly the key to understanding everything about them. And trust me, this was not your typical rock and roll backstory.
The 3 Followell brothers, that's Nathan, Caleb, and Jared, spent most of their childhood in the back of a purple Oldsmobile, just crisscrossing the Deep South. Their father, Ivan Leon, was a United Pentecostal preacher, which meant they were always on the move, from one small town to the next, one church revival to another.
And this really helps explain where their stage presence comes from. Pentecostal services are raw. They're super high-energy events. That passion, that blurring of the lines between the person on stage and the audience, that is the exact same Holy Ghost spirit you see in Caleb's raw, straining vocals and the band's explosive live shows. That was their childhood.
Yeah, their world was completely sealed off. No rock and roll, no movies, not even sports. It was all forbidden. Gospel was literally the only music they knew. So you can imagine the shock when their dad eventually left the church and they moved to Nashville. And as teenagers, they discovered bands like the Rolling Stones and the Pixies for the very first time.
And you can see that wild mix of influences right here. You got Nathan on drums, who got his start playing percussion in church, Caleb's vocals, which sounds so much like his dad's fiery sermons, and then you have the younger guys, Jared and their cousin Matthew, who brought in all these cool influences from post-punk and classic rock. It was this perfect fusion of the sacred and the secular.
So they formed a band, and what happened next was one of the strangest career paths in music history. They were basically a commercial failure here in America, but somehow became absolute rock royalty over in the UK.
I mean, this chart tells you everything you need to know. Their first album, Youth and Young Manhood, was a massive hit in the UK. It went all the way to number 3 on the charts. But back home in the States, it barely made a dent, peaking at a measly number 113. While America was pretty much ignoring them, the UK just couldn't get enough.
The British press just fell in love with their backstory. I mean, these weren't some privileged art school kids from New York. To them, they were the real deal, authentic, raw Southern rebels. They were treated like the saviors of gritty, honest rock and roll. But eventually, America did start to pay attention. And that was because the band made a very conscious decision to evolve from those garage rock heroes into global arena titans. So the big turning point was in 2005, when they toured as the opening act for U2. Night after night, they stood on the side of the stage and just watched how U2 could command a stadium of 80,000 people with these huge guitar sounds and soaring anthemic songs. It wasn't just about being loud, it was about creating a sound that could fill that massive space. And for them, it was a total revelation that pushed them towards that grander, more atmospheric sound on their next album. And for their 4th album, Only by the Night, they completely changed how they made music.
They went from trying to capture a raw, live-in-the-room performance to meticulously crafting this polished, layered sound. They spent countless hours overdubbing vocals, creating these huge walls of sound. They were now making music specifically designed for a stadium.
And here's a great little story. Their biggest hit, Sex on Fire, the song that made them famous around the world, almost didn't even happen. Caleb thought the lyrics were so embarrassing that he had to be talked into even recording the vocals. It's so ironic that the moment he was most reluctant about became his most famous one.
And the result of all this? Just unprecedented success. In Australia alone, Only by the Night went platinum 11 times. It was the country's best-selling album of 2008. The entire world was finally paying attention. Which, of course, brings us right back to where we started. The Grammys, the worldwide fame, the absolute pinnacle of success. They had finally achieved that massive, stadium-sized dream that was inspired by U2. But it was the insane pressure of keeping that success going that led directly to their burnout. So, after the meltdown in Dallas and canceling the tour, the band basically just vanished. They needed to take time to heal, not just as a band, but, as a family.
Their recovery was slow and steady. They took a long, much-needed break from their whole party lifestyle. Band members got married, they started having kids, and they found this new sense of responsibility that really grounded them. They eventually came back with the album Mechanical Bull. And then, in 2016, with the album Walls, they finally did something they'd never done before. They got their first #1 album right here in the United States.
And in just the last few years, they've kind of reinvented themselves all over again, embracing the future with a lot more wisdom and experience. They were one of the first major bands to release an album as an NFT. And then, after more than 20 years, they left their major label to release music completely on their own terms. It's a huge move that really shows a mature band taking back control of their career and their legacy.
Their journey has been like no other. They literally took the fire from the church pulpit and brought it to the rock stage, and they almost got completely burned in the process. It really makes you wonder, when you mix together these incredibly volatile things, family, a strict religious upbringing, and global rock stardom, what's the true price you end up paying?